Righto, diesel owners, listen up, because contaminated and dirty diesel is a pandemic affecting all of Australia right now, and it's costing four-wheel drivers thousands of dollars in very expensive engine repairs. Now, it doesn't matter if you're filling up in the middle of the outback or right in the middle of the city, your next batch of fuel could be contaminated. This is such a massive issue that we thought we'd speak to the diesel filtration experts and ask how diesel contamination and water in your diesel is going to affect your very expensive engine, how to prevent it, and one of the biggest questions facing a lot of four-wheel drivers: should you run a secondary filter before or after your factory filter? Common rail diesels can generate over 30,000 psi in fuel pressure, which is a secret to making them atomise and burn the fuel so much better, resulting in great power and economy. The tolerances are so much finer than human hair, in some places in your injectors and fuel pump as well. This makes them very sensitive to water in the diesel. Water can corrode the inside of your injectors, causing catastrophic damage. Look at how water can damage the injector and affect the spray pattern. This can cause your engine not to just run poorly, it can cause irreparable damage. Injectors alone are several $1,000s to replace. The big problem is dirty diesel and water in diesel is a big problem in Australia. In fact, it might not be a matter of if you're going to get a load of dirty fuel, it's when. So how do you stop it from getting into your engine? There's a few products out there that claim to help stop bad fuel ruining your engine, but here's what I use. It's a pre-filter, meaning it goes before your factory diesel filter. We've set up this test bed to see what happens when you put this dodgy diesel through this filter. I'm down here at Direction Plus, and I reckon that this test bed that the guys have made best simulates what happens with your diesel engine, and in particular your fuel system. Now, when I turn this on, as you can see, if you imagine this is our fuel tank, fuel is being pumped through here via the pre-line pre-filter, and we'll call this one here your injectors and your pump. So fuel is going through and obviously going through this filter here. Now, the beauty of course is that all the fuel is going to get filtered before it gets to injectors and pump, but the really cool thing is it's got an alarm. So if you do get waters or contaminants inside this filter, it's going to let you know when you drive so you can stop and don't do any more damage. Now, right here I've got a glass of water. Now, keep in mind that even the smallest amount of water is going to cause huge damage to your injectors and pump. And look what happens when I pour a little bit in here, call it your fuel tank. Got water in the fuel tank now. That water is going, you can see it, it's coming right up into the pre-filter. It's starting to go through the filter, water's going through. Now, the key is you don't want the water to get into here. As you can see, there's no water getting into the injectors and the pump there. Water's definitely going down, getting caught into that water bowl. Pour a little bit more in. There we go, straight away, the alarm's gone off, and that lets me know that we've got a problem there. I need to turn it off and dump the water out of that before I cause any damage. And the good news is no water has got into what I call the injectors and the pump. So just like that, you can save yourself up to $10,000 worth of damage just by a very simple line of defense for your injectors and your pump. Now we understand even the smallest amount of water can severely damage your fuel system. It makes sense that we run a pre-filter in our four-wheel drives. Now we're just about to hear from Rainer, who's an expert in fuel filtration. He spent a lifetime creating solutions to stop contaminants getting into your fuel system. And he's going to explain exactly how a pre-filter works.
As a matter of fact, the factory fuel filters are designed to capture a certain amount of particles over a certain period of time, which is your service interval. And they are designed to cope with the amount of water that is allowed according to the Australian standard, which is 0.02%. We all know that this is not the reality, and that's why we need an additional fuel water separator to protect our investment.
So the factory filter, you're saying, is okay to cope with the particles in the fuel, but just not the amount of water that we can experience in the fuel?
Absolutely, but also the particle question, same counts. You know, if you get a very bad batch, you fill up your car after the big tanker filled up the tank at the station, you can have much more particles than what the average is and what the OE manufacturer calculated for a service period. If you want to fit a filter after the factory filter, that means you don't trust what the car manufacturer has designed, and you can trust they pretty much know what they do there. So what we want to do is separate water, and in order to separate water, the filter media in our filter has to have certain qualities to do that. One is we need to have a more open filter media because water needs time to separate. We need to agglomerate the small water droplets into bigger droplets and give them time to separate, to actually collect in the water collector down there. And only as an additional functionality, we have a particle separation layer that will actually help to get rid of the more coarse particles. And as a nice side effect, your factory filter will live longer. It's actually the easiest way, because what happens if you push that water diesel mixture through the very fine factory fuel filter, you emulsify that water even more, and it's even harder to separate after the factory filter than it is before.
So basically, by letting the fuel and water mixture go through the factory filter, it basically mixes it so well in with the fuel that it's very, very hard to separate it later. Whereas catching it before the filter, it hasn't had as much chance to mix together with the diesel, and you can separate it a lot more easily.
Absolutely. All right, I've done some rough calculations to explain how much faster the fuel will flow through a fine filter media in comparison to a coarse filter media.
What you've done is you've shown a factory filter is 4 microns, so it's very, very fine to capture a lot of particles. The pre-filter that you're suggesting people fit is 30 microns, so it's a lot coarser. And you're saying that the fuel and water will flow through the factory filter 56.25 times faster than it will the pre-filter.
That's right, through one of the pores, yeah.
So what's the advantage in having the fuel and water flow through the pre-filter much more slowly to be able to stop the water?
What you need to do, those water droplets are very fine, very tiny, very tiny. What you need to do is to give the water droplets time to agglomerate, and then to be big enough to be affected by force of gravity and just drain off.
Okay, so the factory filter is catching all the fine particles. This pre-filter here is allowing the water to flow through very slowly so you can catch it and drain it off before it gets here.
That's right.
I guess that to sum up the principle behind this, anyone looking at water flowing through a river or a creek, as the creek narrows, the water flows through much more quickly. The speed increases a lot.
Yep, that's right.
Small water droplets collect on the filter surface, and these grow to become larger, heavier water droplets. Water is heavier than diesel, and gravity causes the water to drop to the bottom where it's collected. This is where the pre-lined pre-filter differs to every other. Older designs of filters have a plastic bowl like this. This was fine on old tractors where you can see the bowl easily, but in new engine bays where there's nearly no room, you're not going to be able to inspect it all the time. The pre-lined filter has replaced this with the alarm system you saw working before. You run the alarm into the cab of your four-wheel drive and it'll alert you as soon as it senses enough water in the system. Without this feature, you're running a huge risk of water ruining your engine. Just remember that your very next batch of diesel could be the one that causes a lot of damage inside the fuel system of your four-wheel drive, and you'll be up for a huge bill, maybe costing you tens of thousands of dollars. So I am so glad that I've installed a pre-lined pre-filter in the big 79 series here, because as far as I'm concerned, it is the best way to stop contaminated fuel destroying that very expensive fuel system on your four-wheel drive. Now, I know you guys love a good DIY project and you also like to save a little bit of money. So I've twisted the arm over at the guys at Direction Plus to offer you a wicked discount on a pre-lined pre-filter. So you can save 15% for 1 week only. So that's a huge saving and what I think is cheap insurance for your diesel engine. So if you've got any questions or you want to leave a comment below, maybe you've picked up a bad batch of diesel or you've got contaminated fuel. Has it cost you thousands? What do you do to prevent it? Let us know in the comments below. I'll see you around next time.